Good afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen. I am Dr. Levis Guy Obiakor, and I would sit at the head table with, on my left, I have Mr. Alan Richards, the extreme left. To my immediate left is Mr. Hochoy Charles, leader of the Tobago Platform of Truth. To the extreme right, Mr. Neil Wilson, chairman of the Tobago arm of the People's National Movement. And to my immediate right is Mr. Orville London, our chief secretary of the Tobago House of Assembly. Today, we welcome you on behalf of the Secretariat, a non-partisan secretariat that I head with Mrs. Vanessa Cutting-Thomas on the table to the right and Ms. Zelma Cowie. Our responsibility was to record the wishes, your wishes, and we have journeyed throughout Tobago. We have met with the different committees, different working groups, and we've done some sectoral meetings. We had one at Rovenels on the west. We went to Roxborough Secondary School. Then we went to Trinidad at the University of the West Indies Teaching and Learning Center. And we are here today. This is our, and Mason Hall, sorry. And this is our final meeting today in this sector on our journey. This is the convention at the Signal Hill Senior Secondary School as a matter of fact. Today, what we have done is we are going to ask you later on is to give your comments, give your remarks regarding the specific questions that were distributed, not questions, but what was said before, at the meetings before, what was said. We encapsulated all your wishes and comments into one small leaflet. So today I would like to ask first Mr. Neil Wilson, Mr. Orville London, sorry, the Honorable Chief Secretary to bring his remarks, and he'll bring his remarks from the lectern.
Thank you, Dr. Guy. Let me recognize on the head table Mr. Hochoy Charles of the Tobago Platform of Truth, Mr. Neil Wilson. Yeah, give him a round of applause. Mr. Neil Wilson of the People's National Movement, the chairman. Secretaries, assistant secretaries of the Tobago House of Assembly, they've come out in their numbers. Thank you very much for coming. Fellow Tobagonians and well-wishers from Trinidad, let me on behalf of the Tobago House of Assembly and the forum really congratulate you for coming out in your numbers to this very important event. And let me also express to you our appreciation that you appreciate the significance of this process, the sincerity of all intentions as the members of the forum and the THA, and the rule of the people. And I want to just make the point that when you look at the history of revolution or change throughout the years and throughout the world, one of the things that you recognize is that regardless of the commitment and actions of the leaders and the activists, major change almost inevitably depends on the involvement of the people. And it depends on the involvement of the people where they rally around a particular cause, regardless of their political affiliation, their religious persuasion, their geographical location, their age, or whatever. Because those of us who are Christians will understand that yes, you had Jesus Christ, you had the disciples, but were it not for the evangelists, the priests, the martyrs, and most importantly, the masses, Christianity would not have been able to have the impact that it had. With all that we talk about Nelson Mandela, Nelson Mandela was only able to make a change in South Africa when South Africans, regardless of their views on apartheid, recognized it that the time for change had come. And when we gained independence, independence was not gained by Eric Williams alone. As Mr. Charles is very fond of saying, it was Dr. Eric Williams of the PNM and Dr. Reginald Kapilya of the Democratic Labour Party who went to Marlborough to send a signal to Britain that the people of Trinidad and Tobago meant business about independence, and all the people were united in this particular cause. And it is in that context that we have decided to take this particular approach to this particular phase in this long-standing quest, struggle for self-government for Tobago. Because in life, you've got to look back and ask yourself why. And we have asked ourselves why it is that after so many years, we still have not achieved the level of self-government that the vast majority of Tobagonians, regardless of their political affiliation and other differences, agree that we deserve. And I want to just pay public tribute to Mr. Charles, that he came to my office some months ago, and we had a discussion. And in that discussion, we accepted the fact that one of the major reasons why we were unable to achieve that success was because we went into it in a polarized manner. And we went into it in the past with the feeling that one side must get the credit and the other side must be kept out. And we said this time around, we got to do it differently. This time around, we got to do it together. This time around, we got to tell the people of Tobago that this particular issue is so important that it must transcend political differences. And it is one time that loyalty to Tobago must take precedence over the welfare of your political party. And we have been on this journey, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Charles, myself, and initially the Tobago Organization of the People. And I want to place it on record that in addition to that initial grouping, where we had 3 political parties, and I'm saying it, it was one of the best days in my political life to see Ho-Choy Charles, Neil Wilson, Orville London, and Ashwa Jack, who have been political rivals for decades, sitting down in a forum and say, this time around, we're doing it together for Tobago. And it is a little sad that it didn't last and that Mr. Jack dropped out. But I am heartened by the fact that although the hierarchy of the Tobago Organization of the People might not have participated in the process, the people of Tobago, many of whom are and will remain TOP supporters, are part of this process because they understand that this comes before politics. And I want to make 2 more points before I sit. And I want to be very clear. This is not an alliance. It's not an accommodation. It is people fighting together at a particular point in time to achieve their objectives. And I'll quote another statement made by Mr. Charles very early. He said, let me tell you something. We're going to fight together to get what Tobago want, and when Tobago get it, we will fight to see who control it. And I am in total agreement with that. So, this is not a political accommodation, This is a survival strategy for Tobago's development. And I want us all, as we go ahead, to understand that you, the people, we, the people, have a critical role. And I want us, as we look ahead, to look back at our mistakes so that it can inspire us, rather than to focus on blame laying and finger pointing and who brought us where. Because, you know, everybody's trying to still make mileage and still point fingers and still, you know, take revenge and so on and for past hurts. But it's Desmond Tutu who said that when the law of an eye for an eye operates, all the people will end up blind. And I am saying that we are where we are. And if we spend our time focusing on blaming each other for why we are here, we will go nowhere. And therefore, this is the time that we got to take it to the next level and move forward. And we have had very interesting meetings over the past many weeks. And what we're coming here for is confirmation, affirmation, for us to send a signal to those in the country, the rest of Tobago, the rest of the country, the rest of the region, that this time we mean business, this time we're doing it together, and this time we're not taking no for an answer. And I want to reiterate, we will not be able to do it except the people of Tobago send a powerful signal. Politicians can ignore one another. That's the nature of politicians. Because politicians have a limited number of votes. And therefore they can ignore each other and still win elections. Politicians have to listen to the people. When enough people signal to the politicians, if they are not listened to, the politicians will end up punishing themselves. I therefore want us, by the number of us who speak, by the power with which we express ourselves, by the consistency with which we express ourselves, send a powerful signal to the decision makers that we want self-government for Tobago now. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. London. I'd now ask the chairman of the People's National Movement, Mr. Neil Wilson, to give his remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Guy. Let me recognize the Honorable Avi London, the Chief Secretary of Tobago House of Assembly, Mr. Ho Choi Charles, former Chief Secretary and leader of the Tobago Platform of Truth, Mr. Alan Richards, secretaries and assistant secretaries present, guests, members of the media, and hundreds of patriotic citizens of Tobago and elsewhere who have gathered here at Signal Hill this historic afternoon. I salute all of you and welcome you to this convention to decide on the future of Tobago, its children, and their children's children. I am happy and proud to be part of what I am confident will prove to be the final chapter of Tobago's long struggle for its right to govern itself. A struggle that started many, many years ago and was aggressively pursued by the late A.N.R. Robinson and Dr. Winston Murray in 1977 without full resolution. Since then, my friends, several groups have sought to advance the process by consulting consistently with various sectors of the population. In late 2012, a poll was conducted in Tobago to determine what was the greatest desire of Tobagonians at that time. Over 1,400 respondents were interviewed. 97% of them confirmed that internal self-government was their most cherished wish. This result was in consonance with the views expressed by most Tobagonians over the years. It was no surprise, therefore, that on Tuesday, the 7th of January 2014, the leaders of the PNM, the TOP, and the TPT representing the Tobago political parties, agreed on a collective approach to Tobago's struggle for the level of autonomy befitting an equal partner in the sovereign democratic state of Trinidad and Tobago. At that meeting, it was agreed that the parties will meet within 1 month to continue the discussions. On March 18, 2014, two of the parties met at the Mount Irving Bay Hotel to discuss the way forward. Since then, there have been regular meetings with various individuals, civil groups, including religious, business, sporting, youth, cultural, contractors, and other sectors throughout Tobago. We also held a most interactive and productive session at the University of the West Indies in Trinidad, as we sought the widest possible consensus among as many persons as possible in the country. From the outset, ladies and gentlemen, the leaders set themselves a deadline of the end of September to convene this convention for Tobagonians to decide about their future. Given this self-imposed deadline, on many days we met with the people twice a day. The collaboration and consultations have been intense, but we've kept the faith. As you can see, we meet today, 2 weeks earlier than originally scheduled, to bring this vexing issue of Tobago self-government another step closer to finality. It is fitting, ladies and gentlemen, that this convention should be held at this time when the government has moved to foist constitutional reform on the nation without proper consultation with the population. In so doing, it has signaled that by a simple majority, the relevance of the Tobago House of Assembly could be in jeopardy. This, therefore, my friends, is your afternoon. It is the people's afternoon. Your future and the future of Tobago's unborn are in your hands. Today, my friends, is decision time for all of us. We've had 37 years of consultation. Tobagonians have spoken. We at this convention today must leave this place with an understanding and a purpose as to how we take this crusade forward, remembering the words of Abraham Lincoln as he addressed the New York City on February 27, 1860. He said then, and I quote, "Let us have faith that right makes might, and in that faith let us to the end dare to do our duty as we understand it," end of quote. Those were the words of the 16th President of the United States of America, uttered more than 154 years ago. The last 6 months, my friends, have been challenging, enlightening, and productive. And I would want to congratulate the other members of the PNM team, as well as Mr. Ho Choi Charles and the members of his TPT team, Mr. Orville London, the Chief Secretary of the Tobago House of Assembly, who all generously gave of their time and talents to bring this initiative to where it is today. But ladies and gentlemen, without the dedication and hard work of the Forum Secretariat, all that was achieved since May would not have been possible. As one of the leaders, I want to thank Dr. Guy and his staff, Ms. Zelma Curry and Mrs. Cotton Thomas, Dr. Aline, who I don't see here today, Mr. Alan Richards for their commitment, zeal, and competence over those 4 grueling months. I am greatly privileged to be a part of this historic event here at Signal Hill today. And I pray God that He will allow me to experience my most treasured dream, where my children and grandchildren can, within the sovereign democratic state of Trinidad and Tobago, elect their representatives in a Tobago legislature to independently carry out Tobago's people's business with dignity and fairness to all, and without fear of disrespect and unmitigated interference by others. And finally, my friends, I am convinced, I am truly convinced, without a shadow of a doubt, that our cause is right and just. And therefore, as I conclude, I am reminded of a quotation from Martin Luther King, who, in accepting the Nobel Peace Prize on December 10, 1964, said, "That is why right, temporarily defeated, is stronger than evil triumphant." Once again, I want to thank you all for coming, and I look forward to your full participation in this evening's proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. And let me join with the others who have spoken before me to welcome sincerely all of you to what I consider and to what is, in fact, a historic occasion. First of all, I want to thank Almighty God for His wisdom and for the opportunity of bringing us together for this purpose. Secondly, I want to salute the architect of this move for self-government for Tobago, the late Arthur Napoleon Raymond Robinson. We thank God for him, and may his soul rest in eternal peace. May I just say to you that the first meeting in this round of the leaders of this forum, namely the People's National Movement, the TOP, Tobago Organization of the People, and the Platform of Truth, the TPT, took place at Mount Irving Bay Hotel. I'm doing this for the records, it's important. On a Tuesday, the 15th of April, 2014, commencing at 10 a.m., a very significant day. And when I listened to the Chief Secretary quoting me almost on 3 occasions, I said maybe that was a strategy to prevent me from speaking. However, I want you to hear this well quickly. On that date, all of us were unaware that there was going to be a lunar eclipse. It took place on the 14th, the day we met at Mount Irving, on the 15th. And that is what is considered the blood moon. And there are 4 more blood moons to take place between now and September 2015. We were there at Mount Irving having this meeting. Let me just indicate to you, those of you who are Christian, we were also unaware that on that date was the feast of the Passover for our Lord. Something big and great is about to happen. I have no doubt in my mind about that. In paying tribute to Mr. Robinson, I want to just quote something briefly that he said. Then I say, just shortly, a few more things and then take my seat. Very important, in paying tribute to him. This is something that he said in moving the motion for self-government for Tobago in 1977, January 1977. I want you to listen to it well. I quote, "The difference between whatever measure of regeneration that has been achieved in the West Indies in the 20th century is the difference between colonialism, sometimes when you go too fast, and democratic self-government. It is democratic self-government that has saved the West Indies. Insofar as Jamaica is saved, it is democratic self-government that has saved Jamaica so far. Democratic self-government has saved all of them so far. And insofar as they have begun to achieve something, Trinidad is included, you know, all the West Indies Islands are included, and maintain some degree of position in the world, democratic self-government allows this. Not plantocracy, not any form of dictatorship. And it is clear that the future of the West Indies must be in the direction of democracy and integration. You cannot integrate by force. If you integrate by force, as you are seeking to do with Tobago, you are bound to fail. It has to be democracy and integration. This is the West Indian lesson, not colonial style integration, not imperialist integration, but democratic integration. Final quote. Imperialist integration has not worked in Tobago. Tobago will not accept it, and nobody else will accept it. We have arrived at a stage, this is 37 years ago, you know, we're still there. We have arrived at a stage where everything else has been tried in Tobago except democratic self-government. Everything else has been tried and has failed. Colonial administration, commissioner, I want you to hear this, you know, permanent secretary with resident minister, resident permanent secretary with resident minister, all have failed. The case then, end of quote, the case then for democratic self-government is unanswerable. Finally, democratic self-government will allow you, the rest of Tobago, and the administration that you will have the opportunity to put in place, will give you the chance, and I want to deal with only a few of them so that people, because of a question somebody asked me in Plymouth yesterday, to properly develop your agriculture, providing things like access roads, markets, even crop insurance for your farmers. We will do that in Tobago if you have self-government. You can't do it now. It will allow you to develop the tourism that you want. It will allow you to build your new communities. Right now, you still have to get permission from somebody coming from Tongan Country Planning to give you permission to put up a toilet in Tobago. Self-government will change that. Democratic self-government will give you the opportunity to protect your historical sites. And as you know, we have a tremendous history where that is concerned. To allow you the chance to see about your beaches, some of the finest in the world, and to protect the environment. To allow you to protect your Boko Reef, a wonder, one of the wonders of the world. Not going to be too long. It will allow you to develop your sports. And Mr. Robinson had made this point too. Antigua is smaller than Tobago, yet Antigua produced for the world two of the finest cricketers. Andy Roberts, as you know, fast bowler, and one of the greatest batsmen in the world, not in the West Indies, Richard, sorry. Do you know Antigua is 108 square miles, smaller than Tobago. We are 116 and a quarter. We can't even get a person from Tobago to play on the national team, far less to play on the West Indies. That's what self-government will fix that. Listen to this. Finally, I don't want to deal with the rest. Just one before I close. It will give you the opportunity to deal with your land titles overnight. I remember after Hurricane Flora, there was a report prepared by the team that came in. And one of the things that they said, that if you do not fix the land issue in Tobago, you cannot fix the development of Tobago. We're still there. That is how many years ago? 51 years ago. We're still there. That's what self-government means, not what people are talking about. It will allow us to deal with the critical issue of our infrastructure too, including our airport. That's what self-government would give you. It will give you the opportunity to do so. So let us today act wisely and move on like other countries would have done before who have got the democratic self-government. Let your decision today, let our decision today be one that would be pleasing to Almighty God and one that will command not only the attention.
Thank you, Mr. Charles. We now have a presentation, a video presentation. It's a historical view of the transition to self-government.
Thank you, Dr. Guy. Good afternoon to the brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen. You've been so kind and generous with your applause. So I want to suggest that you give yourself some applause just for being here. Thank you. All right. As the chairman says, I'm going to do a very quick summary overview of the process. We're going to start way back 125 years ago, but do it very quickly and come to the point that we are today. Yes. Back in 1888, I mean, the common thread that runs through most of what we would need to say is that the people of Tobago have had little involvement in the critical decisions that affected their lives. So as far back as the 19th century, the late 19th century, when the bicameral legislature was abolished and the Crown Colony government was established in Tobago, and the annexation to Trinidad followed, all of that was done without consultation and participation of the people. Tobago was consequently designated a ward of, ultimately Trinidad and Tobago, initially it said a ward of Trinidad, and it continues in very large measure as a ward, both in terms of the administrative reality and also of the way people conceive of the relationship between Trinidad and Tobago, including Tobagonians. But we just needed to note that, and perhaps that might still be relevant, that the Legislative Council at the time, and that's the Legislative Council of the Tobago House of Assembly, passed a resolution that we should revert to self-government that existed before 1889 if this union didn't work. You change it for me? So we fast forward to independence, and the same thing happened. We had major groups in the nation had inputs into what the independence constitution should look like. Tobago, as an element, a constituent element of the nation, did not have such an input. Similarly, when we came to the Republican status, we weren't consulted in a structured and participative manner. Let's go. Okay. And subsequent to that, and almost on the heels of the Republican Constitution, we had the internal self-government motion moved, as so many of the speakers before have mentioned. Again, in a structured way, the parties from Tobago would have had the people involved, but in a structured way, there was a lack of involvement. In fact, the Simongal draft that Simongal was commissioned to do was not accepted, and that would have had more of the inputs from the people of Tobago in that informal setting. The 1996 Act was perhaps even a little bit worse in that regard. This act was prepared by a committee. There was no input from Tobago, and even if we had a House of Assembly resident on the island and ostensibly responsible for the business of the island, that THE wasn't consulted before the 1996 Act was passed. And need we say at this point, and this is something to note that we ought to pay attention to, that at the passage of every one of these acts, immediately there was discontent with what was passed, and we never felt that what was passed would have given us what was being sought. So immediately there was another round of disaffection, looking to move to the other state. So what we are saying is perhaps at this time, what we ought to be seeking to do is to get a state of organization, a state of relationship that would persist and sustain over a period of time without us immediately on passage feeling dissatisfied with what has been passed. And I think that would be a critical and crucial situation that we ought to address in a convention of this nature. Let's go. Right. There are certain economic implications of the 1889 imperial decree that still exists today. That decree dismantled whatever fiscal responsibility Tobago had for itself, couldn't collect customs duties and all of those things because we became an intertwined custom union. And that existed. That's one of the things people are saying that we need to change, so much so. And it has worked to the detriment of the island and contributes to the psyche that Tobago does not meaningfully contribute to the purse, because almost all transactions are conducted through Trinidad. There's virtually nothing that comes to Tobago. So all the customs duties, VAT, and all those other taxes that you pay are not registered as, because they're not collected in Tobago, and people say Tobago doesn't collect any revenue, which is a fallacy. And it's a fallacy born of the way the fiscal arrangements are structured. And more than that, because there is no way of recording properly what that contribution is. But the thing is that people use that to say that you're not contributing, and consequently you're asking for too much when you're not contributing anything at all. All the more reason why we need to have that sorted out. Okay, so that what occurs as a result of that are handouts to Tobago, and as if Tobago has contributed to what it is getting. and consequential underdevelopment of the island that continues to occur. And I suppose one of the ways in which you can measure that for almost all of the 20th century until the Tobago House of Assembly came back in 1980, there had been no improvement, no increase in the population of the island. And that's because once you got to a mature age that you needed to find work, you needed to educate yourself further, you needed personal development, you'll have to go off to Trinidad or go off elsewhere. With the advent of the Assembly, that has changed, and Tobago is the fastest growing region in terms of population, which still hasn't taken it to the level that we like in terms of critical mass. But that's another story. So the contribution of Tobago resources has been formally diminished, and that's the point I was making there. It's also necessary to point to the social integration of the island. So when people talk, and when we say here that you're not seeking to divide and fracture the social fabric of the country, is because of some of what has occurred over this 125 years of the unequal yoke, as our scholar, Dr. Susan Craig James, so clearly demonstrates in her works on the history of the island. So that we have, by a very conservative estimate, about 250,000 of the people that live in Trinidad are of third generation Tobago extraction. And we think that's a very... so you cannot find a family in Tobago that doesn't have a relative or a comparable counterpart home in Trinidad. By the same token, almost every person you meet somehow would have some relative in Trinidad, would tell you about some relative that they had, some grandfather. And some of them you would have lived with, dealt with for a number of years, who never said anything until one day and say, well, you know my grandmother from Tobago or some such thing. So a whole host of people, all of that would have taken away from the development of the island. And while we are saying that you wouldn't want to necessarily stop that, some of that remaining here would have assisted. So we have areas like Point Fontaine, Labray, and the Industrial South, the East-West Corridor. We'll talk about Toko. For good reasons, there are sometimes two families with similar names and stuff. And you bounce up in a conference and then you realize that you're very, very, very closely related. And we have made contributions at all levels of polity, society, economy, etc. So we need not belabor that point, but that's merely to say that there's a social integration, and of course, the other way around too. Lots of people have come out of Trinidad, made their homes here, and are substantive Tobagonians, vocal and I dare say, aggressive in the way they themselves see the need for Tobago to become more, to determine its life more seriously. And these are some of the other areas we mentioned. Let's go. Okay. And then came the 21st century. And what we had was a more participative, people taking greater participative interest in these issues, not necessarily spawned by organized political groups, but by civil society groups. I mean, and given that whatever action you take in this regard is political, it does, in fact, give, what should we say, credence to the fact that civil society groups were taking the action on their own accord. And so we had groups like the Color Hall Accord with people like Reggie Dumas, Tobago Forum for Consensus with Crystal Giff and Deborah Moore Miggins, who is sitting in the audience I see here. And there were other groups also, not necessarily aligned politically, not necessarily. And of course, the THA established a constitution reform committee called the John Prince Committee. And then the government's green paper that followed all of this. And as a result of the government green paper, the Tobago House of Assembly established a commission to look at all the offerings that were made over the years in relation to the way Tobago should be governed. And what that commission discovered is that those groups and all those different arrangements that happened before had discovered a set of core issues that people said must be addressed and ought to find its way into, or their way into, the relationship between the islands. And those were summarized in the John Prince report and mentioned, in fact, agreed to and mentioned in the green paper. So there was universal acceptance that these were the issues and demands that people of Tobago were making on the political system that would give it the legitimate right to self-determination. Of course, what the various offerings did would not necessarily have treated with the wishes of the people that we felt on the commission. I was convener on the commission. Deborah Moore Miggins was a member. Mr. Gilbert Peterson, senior counsel, was a member. And Dr. Vern Aline, was also a member of that commission. So the demands of the people we've summarized that were very clear. They were saying a federal system of governments, meaning, I think what people understood that to mean very basically, because there are several variations of federal type governments throughout the world, and they're all different. There's no one that is exactly the same as others. But the basic principle is that the constituent parts, the components of the country would have a degree of governance within the constituent element. And then they would have a national government that they would all contribute to, in our case, both islands, and that government would be responsible for certain aspects that both entities would give to that government, and each of them. So we'd have a government of Trinidad, a government of Tobago, and a national government of Trinidad and Tobago, on which they would have equal representation. That's the ideal in a very basic, very simple way. There will be lots of details to be worked out inside of there. But some of the things that we like to see in that system of government that would come naturally, and well, certainly the equality of status. Now, we mentioned before the thing about the ward and all that you'll still find on your documents today. So equality refers to status, and it is probably expressed in that particular thing about the ward. But more than that, it has been, and we could go back to the 1980 when Sir Ellis talked about walking side by side. That's the kind of equality that we are talking about. When you talk about in the anthem, where every creed and race find an equal place. So it does not mean the same thing as equity. It is not saying that the magnitude that, for instance, you share the income. So if Trinidad gets 100 million, Tobago must get 100 million. It doesn't mean that. It just means recognize Tobago as a critical part of the nation of Trinidad and Tobago. Authority to formulate and implement fiscal policy, and we talked about earlier when that was removed back in 1888, 1889. People are saying that that is a critical necessity to help us formulate policies that would allow for real development as distinct from what is occurring at the moment. And of course, following on directly from that, you need the ability to borrow to fund your development. Yes. Removal of cabinet dominance, that would fall, if we have the federal type system, that will fall by the wayside automatically. Section 75 is related to that also, because Section 75 is where the cabinet dominance gets its legal origination. Okay. Jurisdiction and economic control over marine resources, you really can't, you would have a shallow, very empty self-determination if you don't have the authority and the economic resources to take your plans forward. So jurisdiction and economic control is one of the things that people say that we needed to have, which would also take care of that bogey. I mean, for the last, maybe 4 or 5 decades, outside of the normal contributions that Tobago would have been making that's not registered as Tobago contribution, like through the taxes and stuff like that, the normal taxes, the marine resources would have extended not only the boundaries of Trinidad and Tobago, but the resources that are generated from those boundaries. And the way in which that is reported doesn't, and until very recently, doesn't take cognizance of the importance of Tobago in that regard. In fact, not even to the geographical and physical nature. I remember when Mr. Charles was Chief Secretary, I think it was back in 1999 or 2000, for the first time, they published an invitation for international companies to bid for things in the sea around. They were bidding above Tobago, but they were calling it northeast of Trinidad. And I remember the argument he had with the relevant ministers. And when they did change it and said Tobago, that's the first time they mentioned Tobago in any thing. They called Mr. Charles and say, you see the thing in the papers? So that they did in fact change it. So, you know, those kinds of things. Freedom of the THA to make laws to govern Tobago, not what exists now, where if the assembly passes a law, it has to go to cabinet before, and if cabinet doesn't feel to take it to parliament, then that's the end of it. And legislation for wider participation of the society in the decision-making process of the THA. What this seeks to say, and people say, well, who would control Tobago? But it shouldn't be some other elected or nominated body in another place that controls Tobago. It should be the people of Tobago in some form, structured form of organizational arrangement at political, legislative, and perhaps even executive level. However we wish to couch that should oversee the assembly. And what this is saying is that we should have wider participation, and that participation would come out, I suspect, similar to the kind of process that we are having here today. So, in summary, and by and large, those were the main, I'm saying in summary of the demands, those were the core issues that people say attention must be paid to. And then we come to 2014, when the parties who contested the elections in 2013 established a forum, and they said there were 4 major issues that they needed to treat with, and the identification of the issues fundamental to Tobago in a relationship with Trinidad, identification of those wishes, and I dare say they took those wishes, those demands that we just indicated above as the core for what they were seeing as the things that they needed to get confirmation from the people on. And that sort of brings us to where we are today. They decided to establish core principles, and this is how they would have conducted themselves. They set these things for themselves, establish core principles to agreement on a process for inter-party consultation, and devise a mechanism to translate the demands of the people into meaningful reality. That's the key there. Next one, please. Right. Based on that, we set out, and I'm saying we because I've been a part of it, to do consultations first with sector groups. And the sector groups are listed here: parliamentary and THA representatives, all the elected and nominated people serving in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago and in the Tobago House of Assembly; individual political activists, people who were known to have contributed, who would have worked in some of those civil organizations that we talked about in the first decade of the 21st century. They were invited to the business organizations, construction industry, tourism and allied industries, professional organizations and unions, Miss. Financial institutions, the faith-based organizations, arts and cultural organizations, youth and sports, farmers and fishermen, and community-based organizations. So there was a first round of meeting all of these groups to talk with them about these views. And then we had what were considered area conferences that were based more so on a geographical dimension, including Southwest Tobago, which was held at Ravenels, north and east of the island at Roxborough Secondary, north at Central at Mason Hall, and in Trinidad at the University of the West Indies. Those were the events that took place before. And we sought to have confirmation of the core issues, and by and large, there was consensus on the things that were put to them in terms of the federal system of governance, definition of the boundaries of each island, equality of status between the islands, ability to formulate and implement fiscal policy, authority to borrow to fund Tobago's development, jurisdiction and economic control over the marine resources, freedom of the THA to make laws to govern Tobago, and legislation for the wider participation. Those were general, we had general consensus on that. People would have raised questions as to the how and to the do you think you would get that, what methods we should use, and people made suggestions too as to how we should go about doing that. They talked about doing a referendum. They talked about getting thousands of people onto the street, so that there were views expressed as to the how, but people were generally in agreement with. It's as if they were saying that this is your inalienable right, this is our inalienable right, and consequently, what we should be discussing is how we get it done. And more than that, I need to make this, people were saying we should be preparing now. I think a lot of people, a lot of people were saying that really the preparation stage should be now. All now we should be preparing for when this occurs, so that we'll be able to take it and run with it efficiently and effectively. So by and large, there was general consensus on that. Yes? All right. So, this is where we are. We are here today for the decision to ratify, see if you agree and confirm those demands that have been listed as the demands that we need in order to go forward. And perhaps even more critically than that, to determine what should be the forward movement. How do we take this forward to the point that we want to reach? How do we have the vision, we're saying this is where we want to get to. What now do we do in order to take us there? And this is what the convention is about. So here we are. I thank you and look forward to your deliberations.
Now we begin with the open forum. However, there are rules in the open forum where you would be able to state your comments, give your comments, suggestions. You have 3-minute limitation. In the interest of time and in the interest of allowing your fellow Tobagonians to participate in this convention, we would like to ask you to state your name, maybe the organization that you are representing. If you wish, additionally, we would also like to reiterate the 3-minute time limit. Okay, so I'd just like to ask that you stick to the issues, stay with the issues. We have a document here that's been distributed towards autonomy, what you should consider. These are the issues that were discussed at the other meetings and the fora that we had that went before us. And we will also put this information on the screen, but we'd also like to ask you to stick with the information. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm asking your indulgence because I may have to leave shortly after, regrettably. Let me commend everybody. I don't want to waste my 3 minutes on commendations, but I think we all should take a pat on our backs for bringing the process to where we are now. I'm also happy that I think I'm getting the impression that the terminology is now correct to be talking about self-government. Let us all drop the internal, please. Okay. I want to focus on the first element. I think the first element is the most important, equality of status between the islands and a constitutional, legislative, and administrative framework reflecting this. Brothers and sisters, I am suggesting that the concept of equality of status, to me, overpowers everything that Tobago may need at this juncture. I think if we can rally behind that at least, we have captured almost the entire problem. And following on this, the constitutional provisions that we will formulate will pick up the other strands. I mean, it's good to know the other strands, but if we can get that commitment and we all can understand that, as Alan explained, no longer is the concept of a ward to be uppermost in our minds. It is now gone. It is now equality. Then we would have gotten basically what we want. I want to suggest that with all we will get, we need to still focus on the fact that with equality comes the demand that both heads of state in Tobago and in Trinidad have constant interaction. We have to have our chief secretary, or whatever he or she is called, and our prime minister meeting regularly if equality of status is to find true expression. To me, it will likely not work if we have the attitude that is currently prevailing continue. So everybody must understand that. Secondly, when we talk about the legislative and administrative framework reflecting this, we on the Commission had gone into some details, which I want us to bear in mind. One of those details is that we had recommended a bicameral system so that it would not only be the Executive Council as now prevails if you go for the recommendation, but it would be the Executive Council and the People's House. And both bodies coming together would form the legislature of Tobago. Now that is something you have to grab your arms around, because what you are likely to be recommended if you accept that is that the Executive Council and its powers may be reduced somewhat. And at this juncture, we'll have to pay credit to whoever is the incumbent for agreeing eventually that his or her powers vis-a-vis the Executive Council may take some reduction. And that was our response to concerns which were being expressed about fairness of decisions, abuses, the powers of the Executive Council. And there was a feeling that perhaps we needed a system whereby that the Executive Council can be there can be an oversight. So that would be another consequence of the first category, which would be constitutional and legislative framework reflecting this. Madam, I think I've exhausted my 3 minutes. You will tell me otherwise. But in terms of the transition, our very critical concept is the Transition Commission. Now, all these things go under the first heading there, which is the legislative framework reflecting this. Now, what you have it there in short, it really reads, the constitutional, legislative, and administrative framework reflecting equality of status. So how do we craft the Constitution to portray equality of status while at the same time providing for oversight over the Executive Council, providing for transition of powers to the Tobago House of Assembly, etc. So I'm saying we need to focus when we talk equality of status and we talk the framework is going to bring out quite a lot of things which we need to understand up front, because when you vote for equality of status, you are likely voting for those elements. I thank you very much, Madam.
Good evening, everyone. Those at the head table. My name is Lionel Summers. Everybody know me as Pandy. Now, every time when you come to these kind of a forum, they always give you a limited time to talk. I think I have more to say, much more than 3 minutes, and it's important not for me only, but for the future of Tobago, because from the inception, when it had this forum at the Cadler Hall area, Mr. London wasn't there, right? Mr. Ochoy Charles was there. Mrs. Deborah Moore-Miggins was there. Mr. Dimas was there. And we didn't want any politician to have any part of it. Mr. Charles, you know that, right? So the situation, what I have to say is that I will do my due somewhere else, not here, because it will take much more time. We don't see you all the time, all there in the big chair, and we cannot see you all to discuss our problem. This is serious. Thank you.
Some calm, some calmness. We want to run with order. I am, for state, I have to say Reverend Dawn Gray, but for church, I am Apostle Evangelist Dawn Gray. And I'm representing Dawn's Evangelical Ministry and my community at Goldsboro, the village council and so on. In 2010, to be exact, God told me to go in the secretariat and sit and pray and understand the process and the issues when motion comes into the House. And I sat there for 2 years. Every plenary session I'm there understanding politics, and I'm praying that these policymakers will make the right decisions. So I started to understand and understand the process and how the issues are brought. And I want to touch on the responsibility of THA to formulate and implement policies on all matters affecting the lives of people resident in Tobago. And I thank God that in the past, a lot of emotions and feelings were dominant, but people start to use emotional intelligence to reason out and to accept some things, you know, in a proper way. And the right to make laws under this, I think it is very important. Because every time you sit and you hear they read out the itinerary, bills come back from Parliament, nothing for years. And I believe that we are crippled in doing certain things because we cannot give our own opinion, we cannot rationalize things, you know, as a body of people in Tobago. And I'm not of any political party, I want you to know. I am speaking about the issues as I see it, and I understand the politics, and I commend all the technocrats for forming and bringing these issues to the fore. And I am going to continue to pray as a woman of God that things will happen in Tobago, and very soon. Thank you.
Good afternoon, brothers and sisters, members of the table. My name is Winston John. I'm going to be very short. For 37 years, we have given the authorities, the people with the knowledge, that's the lawyers, the architect, whoever, the job to build me my house. I'm here, I've seen what they have presented, and I'm totally satisfied. But like the sea king, my strength is fading. So what I have to say is that we have seen man landed on the moon. We have seen apartheid dismantled. We have seen the Berlin Wall is being dismantled. We have seen a black man president of America. What next is there for us to see in our lifetime? What next is there for us to see in our lifetime? I want you to say it loud so that they will hear it and they'll know that we are serious. You know what we need now is full internal self-governance. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Anthony Paul. I reside at Calder Hall. Today, I come here for my grandchildren. Well, I don't have no grandchildren. I have children, and soon they will be finishing school. But equal rights, status, let me deal on that for the 2 little minutes we have. I'm not no educated fella, but I will try my best. Here what's going on. Equality, you have to be self. Status is still self. So between it come is 1, 2, because from your head you will meet your neck, right? So they will go on. But I want to say, for we to get this legislation right, we have to put it in the kindergarten, we have to put it in the primary school, we have to give them it as a what you call it, a SA. You show them a SA, all right? How we will be governed, how we will be governed in our legislation, how we will be looking. So we want to teach the children about this constitution, how Tobago must be on itself, because my father lived here. I was a Trinidadian, but wherever my father is, I shall be. And now I have children here. So I don't want them to be in the same thing that my father in and I want us to be Tobago. You know, I go feel Trini, but the Tobagonian go feel Tobago, because Tobago is a special place for everyone who come here and who leave, you know. But we want those. We say, my little baby just tell me, she come too far to give up now. And if you give up now, we will be getting nowhere. So I want you to put it in the school. You put it in the school from that elementary. So 18 years from today, the children will know what's going on. All of we here is 35 and thing, you know, over 35. So you can say, we go in, we trying to make it stand, but give the children it, give them, and let them report to you when a test come up. Test coming up in November, give the children and let them do the test, do some tests on Tobago. Let them know what is Tobago. So whether even if they go away, but when they come back, they must have something of Tobago. And if they have something of Tobago, then we will grow to be a state and have our own legislation. Good night.
Good evening to the head table, Secretary. My name is Christina Winchester. I am from John Dial, and I'm doing this for my deceased mom, who all my life always wants self-government for Tobago. One thing I want to ask the people who, Mr. Ho Choi, Mr. Chief Sec, please, we are going to get self-governance. And when it comes, I want you all to prepare and be ready for it, because I don't want them to have no excuse for not giving us it. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Aldington Spencer. Firstly, I want to endorse the demands of the people. I'm in full agreement with the demands. However, I want to say that the conversation must continue. In the same way that the leaders of the political parties got together and decided to sink all differences and deal with Tobago's priorities. After we get internal self-government, those priorities would remain. And instead of us fighting to see who will control it, we should continue to sit together and decide how we use the autonomy that will be given to Tobago. I heard Mrs. Miggins mentioning the format that may be able to work, and I think I want to agree with her. But this forum, to me, is the embryo of that other people's house he was talking about. And I would want you to consider that as a part of the going forward. I thank you.
Good evening. Members of the head table, to my brothers and sisters in the audience, my name is Clyde H. Adams. I recognize that we are very quiet here today, very quiet. We have to song the message to the rest of Tobago. We have the press here. Far and wide to Trinidad, let them know that we are serious. Let us say that we are ready. Those who read the good book, the Bible, would remember about the Israelites when they left Egypt. A journey that was supposed to have taken 40 days took them 40 years. You know why it was like that? The lack of commitment. I'm saying, brothers and sisters, today here assembled, let us show that we are committed. I maintain, for your consideration, that our presence here is a new beginning. What did I say? A new beginning. It must be that after we have left this place, a movement will be afoot, or we will be on stream, that we take it from Charlottesville to Crown Point, from the north to the south, our children and our babies will be singing praises that we would overcome. For too long, we have been sitting here and we have been saying this would happen. So if you are committed, say yes. Yes. Let me hear you say yes. Yes. Good. Autonomy, in my view, and I must take the opportunity again to commend our brilliant minds who sat, listened, and put that together that they can come to us today. Let me hear a round of applause for them. Autonomy is not maybe, perhaps, or maybe sometimes. I'm putting it to you, brothers and sisters, that autonomy for Tobago is a must. Say a must. A must again. And we have to move on. The great United States in 1776, before that, the colonies had their own agenda. But you know what? They put that aside and decided to fight for one cause. And the United States is great today because of the efforts. We want to be part of greatness. Let me hear you. We want to be part of greatness. And we cannot sit back. We must not sit back and believe that it will come to us with somebody else doing our work for us. When we leave here today, each one of us, all of us, must take it seriously that we indoctrinate our children and our children's children, so that when the time comes, let me tell you something, do not fool yourselves. It will not come easy from Trinidad. And I see my 3 minutes is up. I see she's taking the mic to tell me. But I want to tell you, greatness is greatness. We must be great. And I'm saying the time has come. We have to be evangelists, as it were, from Trinidad and Leon, all over Tobago. We have to say, we must be great. We will overcome. The time has come that we will not turn back. And we will overcome. May God bless us all.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I want to commend, my name is Haynes Cowie Clark. My name is Haynes Cowie Clark, member of the TPT, the Platform of Truth. Right, in standing here to support I think it's going to be a resolution. I just want to commend the leaders of the various parties that have come together. And you know, I was at the meeting at Mason Hall, and I took my young son 1.5 years, and I said I wanted him to be a part of history, because at that time I thought that I may possibly not live to see this become a reality. I left him home today on purpose, because I am convinced that I am going to see this thing become a reality in my lifetime. And I'm saying that to say, and to encourage our leaders to let us get this thing going immediately. We have lost a lot of time, we have lost a lot of lives, we have lost a lot of effort. And we were wise enough as an island nation to come together for this singular purpose. We should keep our eyes fixed on it. And I am asking the people of Tobago now, as an ordinary citizen, I am an ordinary citizen, I'm asking you as fellow ordinary citizens, let us not focus now on our political, our personal, our other interests, but let us be singular in focusing on achieving this. And then afterwards, as my leader says, after we have achieved this, then we'll deal with the other business. Right now, ladies and gentlemen, Tobagonians, let us put our effort into achieving our just deserved self-government for Tobago and its people. Thank you very much.
My name is Lance Jack. I'd like us all here today to authorize the forum to rewrite a relevant constitution for Tobago, one that could be used for debate among all peoples in the school and everywhere. It must be in such a manner that it will be used as the guide in the discussion with whatever bodies, Trinidad, United Nations, whatever, that we have to move to. But before we leave here today, we must authorize the forum to write the relevant constitution and have it available to whosoever may need it. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon to the head table. My name is Winifred Stout. I am like Martin Luther King this afternoon. I had a dream. Martin Luther King said he had a dream about America would have a black president. He have a dream that people is going to come together. Well, I have a dream since I know myself. I'm not satisfied with how Trinidad will treat Tobago. And I'm telling you, I have a dream that we will have self-government where we, the people of Tobago, can govern Tobago business for itself. I have a dream this afternoon, and I want everybody to go when they leave here with that dream, that we could come together, you know, and stand up for Tobago, because I say Tobago is not be treated fairly. Good afternoon.
I heard Sister McGinn say that we should not desire internal self-government. But I'm just quipping to say that self-government and autonomy are things that we must internalize, things that we must live. As a Tobagonian myself, my interest, and I suppose it's all our interests, should be to that end. And if history is to objectively be documented, we would have learned from the failure of polarized stands and the destructive stands that were taken by the people of Tobago from time to time. I've put these words to emphasize that every minute that Tobago remains without autonomy, the fate of the future of the unborn deteriorates. We have felt the pain of residing in the smaller entity of what is known as a Twin Islands relationship, in which there is to be equity between the entities. Those of us who deal with relationships are only too aware that when the status of relationships in which there is inequity must be adjusted, the adjustment becomes the subject of great conflict. I cannot expound on the mechanics of legislation, but I listened carefully to the submissions of the presenters from the head table, and each prayed that the will of God should prevail. One writer posits that it is the secret of the ocean will be found in the dewdrops. The converse is also true. And as a predominantly Christian island, we should be guided by God's model for one-to-one relationships, as is written in the epistle to the Ephesians, chapter 5 and verse 21. It says, "Be subject to one another as unto the Lord." And even as the statement to turn the other cheek and give your coat as well as your cloak are statements that promote mutual respect, in which each person is asked to facilitate the self-government of every other person. Thus being the case for individuals, the dewdrop, it remains true for the family, for units, for villages, communities, and the islands. While we should not be fighting for equity, it should be given freely. It is necessary for us to know our God-given rights and challenge the status of the relationship by demanding that God's will prevails in the relationship between the islands. In principle, Tobagonians, that which we call intangible is paramount. I call for patriotism. We must know who we are, and we must stand up for who we are. I call for discipline. I call for appropriate, and that is Tobago-specific education. We must know about our island, we must know about our culture, and we must stand up for it. Each entity should be able to control its resources in a way that it can contribute as it sees fit to the welfare of the union. If we look at our houses, each pillar of a building stands on its own, but contributes significantly to the stability of the building. Autonomy is ours by divine order. Autonomy is ours by right. Let us begin by setting standards by which we can be identified. Let us recognize our genealogy. Let us not disparage our culture. Let us respect one another and foster a sense of patriotism and move forward listening to God, even as the children of Israel were admonished by Moses. Thank you.
Mr. London.
I just want to say I suggested to the chairman that we ask the Archdeacon to make a copy of that statement available so that it can become part of our permanent records. I think some of the statements made there are powerful and should be shared. Thank you very much.
My name is June Melville. I am very comfortable this evening because, ladies and gentlemen, having spent most of my life outside of Tobago and to come back home and to see that equality wasn't the accepted norm in Tobago, I wasn't pleased. I remember my mother told me, my mother, Mrs. Pearl Pollard, who was previously a member of the Tobago House of Assembly, she told me she could not understand why Tobago was not walking side by side with Trinidad. And ladies and gentlemen, let me just mention here, over the past 14 years since I returned to Tobago, I have been working with an organization that is based in Trinidad. And I know how hard it is as a Tobagonian. You have to fight to let them just remember Tobago. So many things will be said, Trinidad, Trinidad. And I will have to say, what about Tobago? And it is very important for us as Tobagonians to do as the other speakers said. We have to stand up and fight. Just yesterday, I'm a member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and just yesterday, for our Sabbath class for the teenagers, the story was about the Israelites walking around the walls of Jericho, and on the seventh day, they shouted loudly. They walked around 7 times, and then they shouted loudly, and the walls of Jericho came down. We Tobagonians have got to shout, and if necessary, we're going to walk from Charlottesville to Crown Point, because we are insisting that we must have self-government. And I am praying. My mother is now 82 years old. She's very active. She's very strong. And I'm praying that within her lifetime, she will see that Tobago has equality status with Trinidad, and we will achieve self-government in Jesus' name.
Madam Chair, good evening. Good evening to the head table. My name is William McKay. Good evening, participants. Somebody in their wisdom thought about this day, and I must compliment this day. We are not the only ones fighting for self-government. How many of you all know that today there's a referendum taking place in Scotland? Scotland, the UK, people talk about the UK. Scotland is fighting today, voting on a referendum. Let me go back to the Green Paper. The Attorney General in his wisdom would have quoted the UK model, the Indian model, and the Canadian model. I'm not sure which one of the models he would have used to finalize his document. However, on page 20 of the document, and I quote, this is the Canadian model. It should also be noted that arrangements have been made between the federal government and the provinces of Newfoundland and Nova Scotia for sharing of revenues from oil and gas production. Ladies and gentlemen, we know of our oil and gas outside of Tobago. How much of that is shared with Tobago? Thank you all, gentlemen.
Members of the head table, I address you. My name is Orville Scott, and I am addressing some issues here. Item under issues, number 2, definition of boundaries of each island in accordance with Constitution, and subsection A of item 3 under the same issues, jurisdiction and control over Tobago's economic resources on land, air, and sea. And on the other side, just completely opposite, commercial interest, fishing and agricultural association, small businesses, groups, chamber of commerce, labor, etc. Let me make a startling statement which perhaps 90% of the persons sitting here or Tobagonians do not know. There are only 2 nations in the world like Trinidad and Tobago. That's Trinidad and Tobago and Israel. For your strategic geographic positions, you are sitting on one of the most significant sections of the world. In fact, Israel is between Africa, Asia, and Europe. You are in the epicenter of South America, North America, Central America, Africa, and Europe. So you are more significantly situated than even Israel. Israel, on the other hand, is surrounded by enemies. We are not surrounded by enemies. A nation that sits on land, or people who sit on land, occupy land that they don't own, are slaves on that land. And so are Tobagonians, because from Charlottesville down to Crown Point, the Tobagonian does not own Tobago and sits quietly while other people own Tobago, and those persons who in authority who can get the land of Tobago for you have no interest in getting your land. There's another issue. If any of you starting to work with a bachelor's now and getting $150,000 a year, you cannot look forward to the time in the future when you can own 1 acre of land with a proper house on it. No time in the future. Owning land is power. All these things, autonomy, self-government, etc., would be nothing if you do not own Tobago. And you do not own Tobago. So you are slaves on the land. Thank you.
Madam Chairperson, Chief Secretary, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. Whitney Alfred, name Whitney Alfred. In our slow march towards self-government or full autonomy, I would like us as Tobagonians to keep in mind 3 key words. 1, self-determination, the other, nationalism, and the third, self-reliance. Self-determination, nationalism, and self-reliance. This exercise this afternoon is an excellent example of self-determination at work. Tobago must determine the form or system of government we think is best for Tobago. We must not abdicate or give up this responsibility to any other group of people. The next key word is nationalism. This is more challenging for Tobago. Nationalism means, among other things, that deep sense of pride that one has for one's country, pride in country, pride in national anthem, pride in the institutions, pride in national flag. We as Tobagonians have to have pride in the geographical space we call Tobago. We have to have pride in the geographical space we call Tobago, as well as pride in the twin island state of Tobago. We have to have great pride in the institution we call the Tobago House of Assembly. When agents of central government attempt to encroach on the legal rights of the Tobago House of Assembly, we must not leave it to the Chief Secretary and members of the Tobago House of Assembly alone to speak up and speak out. As Tobagonians who take great pride in the institution called the Tobago House of Assembly, we must confront the agents of central government and let them know in loud and clear terms that what they are doing is wrong and will not be condoned. Their encroachment on the powers of the Tobago House of Assembly is contradictory to the march for self-government. The seriousness of our voice and our demeanor may well instill fear in their heart and in their mind, and so be it. Self-reliance is the next key word we should bear in mind in our march toward self-government or full autonomy. As the word implies, we must rely on ourselves. We must depend on ourselves. We must rely on ourselves for the food we eat. We must produce all the food we need, export the surplus. We must rely on ourselves to produce the doctors, the nurses, the engineers, the electricians, the cadre of efficient and effective public servants. We must produce all our teachers. We must produce our lawyers, our architects. We must produce all the mason, carpenters, all the skilled workmen. This requires a quantum leap in education. This requires a quantum leap in education. We must be responsible for our own security. If central government doesn't want to give Tobago its own police service, no big deal. The banks have their own security personnel. TSTT has its own. Tiantec has its own. WASA has its own. There is no clause in Adam's will which says that the Tobago House of Assembly, like the other organizations, cannot have its own security personnel. Finally, Madam Chairperson, in our march towards self-government, we have to create a new Tobago man and a new Tobago woman. No longer must we go to work, whether in the private sector or in the public sector, and work for 2 hours or minus 2 hours. March towards self-government, full autonomy. I leave with our people these 3 key concepts: self-determination, nationalism, and self-reliance. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
I have never seen myself as a Tobagonian any less than a Trinidadian. I am of equal or even higher status than our contemporaries. Maybe the impression we give to Trinidad by our actions is that we have to hear what they have to say or decide what to do before we can act. The Methodist has a hymn which says, stand up for Jesus. So I say, stand up for Tobago. Stand up for Tobago's self-determination. And as the singer says, let us stand up for our rights. Stand up, people of Tobago. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and the members of the head table. My name is Mordecai Gift Sandy, and as an ordinary citizen, I think I'm talking for our people, because we are suffering when we go to Trinidad and when we need to come back. And the little boats that they have, at times we cannot tell whether they're going or when they're coming. And one thing I would like, if there is any way that they can fix it, because there's a hole in the bucket and they say, fix it, fix it. And what I am saying here is, there was a boat that they called the Panorama, and I know, I have been in Trinidad and see Panorama parked at the harbor down there. I don't know how long, because it's a little while I haven't been down there, and that it was being painted and maybe fixed. And I would like to know if the Tobago government can get back the Panorama to be on the run. So that the problem that we have in people standing up on the wharf and sleeping and cannot go, John, fix it. There's a hole in the roof, fix it. There's a hole in the boat, fix it, so that everybody would be able to be happy in Tobago. Because when you go to Tobago and you cannot, Trinidad, and you cannot come back, it's enough for them to show us bad face and for them to treat us badly. So make sure you have your own boat so nobody can't treat you bad. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the head table, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ingrid Melville. I want to also commend the team who have put together this work. And I noted at the inception that there was a mention that one of the purposes of the forum was to be able to translate the demands of the people of Tobago into meaningful reality. And I am not sure that at this point in time, we have a roadmap or a strategy for achieving that meaningful reality. I've heard people speak about putting on their boots and marching, but I believe that at this point in time, we need to develop a national political strategy for moving these demands forward, a national legal strategy, an international legal strategy, and an international political strategy. I say that because there are so many mechanisms that are there before us so that all this work does not become a dust collector. We can't just hand it over and wait for people in their own time, at their own will, to grant us what we are asking for. There are various mechanisms that are in place, including the Universal Periodic Review, the UPR, which is a national document which the government of Trinidad and Tobago is duty-bound to prepare and to involve all sectors of the population in preparing. And our National Periodic Review is due for submission in 2015. So I think as part of the strategy that we are developing today is how we can get these demands in the UPR for Trinidad and Tobago. Because when I look at the UPR, which is a document that is presented to the United Nations, when I look at the UPR for 2011 that was presented on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago, 3 challenges were noted. Brothers and sisters, 3 challenges. These challenges were the elderly, the fact that there was no institution to deal with the issues of the elderly. Another challenge was the fact that our boy children were not achieving as much as our girls. And the third issue was something equally important, but which does not speak to the struggle of us, the people of Tobago, which has been going on for so many decades. This document reflects the human rights aspirations of Tobagonians. And that is why I want to also add my voice to Mrs. Miggins to say, bullet point number 2, we need to put back the word constitutional. These aspirations must be included in the Constitution and in the National Administrative Framework. Because if it's just a piece of legislation, anybody can tamper with it and deal with it willy-nilly. We need to put it into the bedrock of the rights of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. I know that we probably have those strategies somewhere, but I'm just reflecting that I have not seen them. And I think they are really necessary, because if you look at the struggle of the people of Scotland, they had various timelines. They had various milestones. They did not just wake up one day and reach the point of secession. And similarly, we in Tobago, we need to ensure that we have a well thought out strategy for achieving these objectives. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, before this gentleman speaks, not before, after he's finished, we have to have some sort of confirmation on the items that we put forward. So after he speaks, this is the last speaker, and then after 1 minute after we review, then we would continue. We just want to take a vote. Thank you.
A pleasant good night to the head table. A pleasant good night to the general attendants. My name is Claudius Fillmore Melville, and I'm here to articulate some of my personal feelings in respect to the way forward, and also to supplement or support a lot of speakers who have spoken before me. But before I go that way, I would like to posthumously give praise and credit to APT James and our former president, A.N.R. Robinson. I also would like to heap some praises on some of our experienced former administrators and persons of civil society. Mr. Reginald Dumas comes to the fore, Dr. John Prince, who was instrumental in the first draft, Ms. Eastland Mackenzie, Dr. Eastland Mackenzie, and so many, Dr. Winston Marie, and so many others, too many to mention. However, the main objective of my appearance here tonight is to seem to disseminate a lot of rapturous views in respect to our hydrocarbon deposits and the way forward in respect to sharing with Trinidad. As we all are aware, Tobagonians are hell-bent on saying it's our oil and our time now. I have a different view. I am of the opinion, I am of the knowledge that when oil were not marine-based or marine origination, they were land-based. And Trinidad, in their time of land, developed land oil, has supported Tobago all the time. Now it's our time, so to speak. How are we going to go forward? We have the Dispute Resolution Commission making certain recommendations in respect to how the economy should go in respect to Tobago's share, 3.4 to 6.9. I'm saying, why now? Why not a 10% basic? Because we look at the last budget, 64.4 billion, 10% would have given us 6.4 billion. 5% would have given us almost what we just got. Close around the 6.9, but very far from the 10. My rationale is, If we have technical persons, administrators, economists, intellectuals, you name them, we have them. Why can't we draw up a task force representing abroad as much as possible the Tobago spectrum, religiously, civil society, politicians, academics, intellectuals, you name them. We can draw up a real, genuine task force in this modern time to go forward, because we must be cognizant that negotiations in time of peace are always drawn out because there's no agency. But negotiations in time of war seemingly never easy. Here we are rational people. Get our people, not saying they are PLM, not saying they are old top, not saying they are this, not saying they are that. Everybody saying they are Tobagonians, and this is our way forward. Our hydrocarbon deposits that are outside of Castara, right in our immediate proximity. Let's say, well, here how we go forward. In future budgets, we are going to disregard the dispute resolution commission, and we're going to have straight fixed part of the national budget to be a part of Tobago's budget. A fixed part. If it's 10%, let's be straight. We want 10%. That will give us, in effect, some more contribution from, some more royalties from that oil out there, or that natural gas out there. But if we stay right now and say 6.9, we won't get anywhere. We won't get anywhere. We are not going to fight them. We are going to reason. We are in a modern age, information and technology. Many thanks, my leader.
The responsibility of the Tobago administration to formulate and implement policy on all matters affecting the lives of the people resident in Tobago. All those in favor? Those against? We have a unanimous decision. Equality of status between the islands and a constitutional, legislative, and administrative framework reflecting such equality. Please vote by show of hands. Those in favor? Those against? A federal type system of governance. Those in favor? Any against? Any against? Okay, let's put the gentleman in the back. Jurisdiction and control over economic resources in Tobago's defined geographic space. Those against? What are you having? Jurisdiction and control over economic resources in Tobago's defined geographic space. Yeah, I did that, yes. Right.
Definition of boundaries.
Okay, I picked that. Delineation of the boundaries of each island. Freedom of Tobago administration.
The question you asked a while ago, I did not hear it.
Hey, what?
Tell me you have a chance to speak on it.
Mr.
Yes,
Ademi, you will have a chance to speak.
No, I
after.
said I did not heard what you asked prior to this one that you're asking. This is why I came here. I did not heard, so I must ask it. Thank you.
Freedom of the Tobago administration to make laws to govern Tobago. Those in favor? Those against? Ability to borrow to fund Tobago's development. Any against? Authority and responsibility in the Tobago administration to formulate and implement fiscal policy, including taxation measures. Those supporting? Those against? Removal of cabinet dominance and override of decisions made.
When you're done, any against? When you're done, get free.
Any against? A legal framework providing for the wider participation of Tobago society in the decision-making process of the Tobago administration. Any against? And the final one, management and control of the inter-island transportation systems to reside in Tobago.
Any against?
Any against?
Any against?
Any against? Okay, is there anyone who would like to make any comments?
My name is Greville Nicholson of Nicholson and Nicholson. My plea with you, dear ladies and gentlemen, is to the whole community. Here abideth faith, hope, and love. I use love instead of charity. Of these three, love is the greatest. I commend love to all of us. Thank you.
Good afternoon to the head table. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm glad I'm living today. My name is Jennifer Chapman. My name is Jennifer Chapman. You know, and as I listened to the national anthem, part of it said that every creed and every race find an equal place. And may God bless our nation. And I want to encourage our leaders that I'm feeling good that you all reach this stage that you can cooperate and to come to this agreement. And I'm saying that as the children, as there was a time in the Bible where a group of people decided to build a tower to reach heaven. And they had a mind to do it. Everyone had a mind to do it. And the word of God said nothing was going to stop them. And the only person that could have stopped them was God. Because they was in unity, and whatsoever they set out to do, everybody was in agreement, and they decided we must build that tower. And the only thing that changed what they were decided to do was God. I'm saying that let us as a people rally around our leaders, especially our Tobagonians. You know, when I check over the years, the Trinidadians would not throw away their leaders, don't care what they do. They would not pull them down and throw them aside, don't care what they do. But it is very easy, even from Mr. Robinson, the past president, and so forth, we will pull them down, we will throw them aside. Mr. Charles, you rally around and simple ring bada and other. We just go along with the politician from Trinidad and we throw aside our Tobagonian leaders. I'm saying at this time, let us rally around them. Let us be determined. I sit there and I listen to almost everybody. And when they were asking who in agreement, yes, we chop our hands in agreement. But when come to rally around them, I'm saying let us rally around them. Let us go for it. And let us rally around them. Not just here this evening, but let us continue. I am not missing matters with my what do you call the word? I'm going to get it. My sovereign rights. My sovereign rights to live in Tobago. My sovereign rights to get what I want in my space. I'm not missing matters with that. And I'm saying unto you, I'm going to continue to pray. The same 2 bills that you all had. I took those 2 bills. My daughter thought I was crazy. I said, I mean business. I'm going to God with this. I say, whatsoever is right in this bill for Tobago, let it happen. If it is not right, move it out of the way. And we are going to go full force rallying around all you. Just be mindful of this matter and rally around them. Continue with a strong mind and let us go forward with our Tobagonian leaders.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, Mr. Members of the head table. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Newton Paisley James. I was born in Belgarden, but I don't live there. When I came in this afternoon, the lady asked me, where are you from? So I said, I'm from Arima. And she frowned, but I said, listen, I was born in Belgarden. I went to the consultation they had on, went to the conversation they had on constitutional reform, and I had a paper that you're not hearing? I went to the Constitutional Forum and had a paper on proposal for constitutional change. Because I'm Tobagonian and because I was involved in the struggles for internal self-government, it was predicated on, one, that the inequality of Trinidad and Tobago. My view, my legal view, I'm a lawyer by profession, I must say. My legal view is that if you're going, that Tobago is being discriminated against. Tobago is marginalized, left out. That is my view, and everybody knows this. And to address this, I had come up with some proposals. I'm just going to read it here tonight. One is that we divide Trinidad and Tobago into two systems. The House of Representatives of Trinidad and Tobago, House of Representatives of Tobago, where Tobago would have its own legislative regime to cover all the affairs of Tobago, and Trinidad has its own regime to cover its affairs. And the reason being is that we have created a national parliament in Trinidad and Tobago, and the national parliament is the problem in Trinidad and Tobago. The reason is that you only have 2 seats there, and that is irrelevant. I've also provided that Tobago should have its own high court, a own high court in the sense that our legal affairs, if you're going to run the country, we must have a court system. Why must the registry in Port of Spain control the registry in Tobago? Why do we have to wait on a judge to come up from Trinidad to do a case in Tobago? So we would have our own legal system, whole court system, where our courts will deal with our legal problems, our administrative and judicial and legal problems. If you want me to talk?
3 minutes. Yes, sir, you have about 1 more minute.
I am sorry that I offend people. I don't know. I didn't know that. I also believe that Tobago should have its own police service. Where it's habits, we will be responsible for policing in Tobago, not to be controlled by a commissioner of police in Trinidad. I have worked out that the mechanism will be that...
Mr. James, do not be dismayed. You can submit your documents by email, and you can also submit your documents by email, or you could call us or come to our office. The time to move the motion has come. This is now decision time. To formalize all that we have done, I would like to ask for someone in the audience to move the motion. Ms. King, Mrs. King.
They give me a mic. Good evening to the members of the head table, the secretariat, the media, the secretaries, assistant secretaries, you, the participants in the audience, and by extension, the citizens of Tobago. I have been given the responsibility to present to you the draft of the resolution towards self-government that was compiled by contributions. So I'm here to move this resolution at this time. Whereas the issue of democratic self-government for Tobago has engaged the people of the two islands, Trinidad and Tobago, since the Union of 1889. And whereas the need to establish an appropriate Tobago self-government has been recognized by all participants in the national political arena since 1977, but remains an outstanding goal of the Tobago people. And whereas, in consideration of the issue of Tobago's self-government, useful points of departure or reference for the establishment of Tobago's right to self-government can be found in the provisions of the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago, the decisions of the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, the assertions of universal and international entities, and the conventions of natural justice. And whereas specific citations that support Tobago's right to self-determination can be found in international law and conventions, particularly 1, United Nations Charter, 2, United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, 1948, 3, the Declaration on the Granting of Independence to Colonial Countries and Peoples, 1960, which states, all people have the right to self-determination. By virtue of that right, they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. And 4, the International Convention on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights of 1966. And whereas every other system of governance other than democratic self-governance has been tried in Tobago and has failed, and whereas the Chief Secretary and the leaders of the 3 political parties contesting the Tobago House of Assembly elections in 2013, namely the People's National Movement, the Tobago Organization of the People, and the Platform of Truth, conscious that most fundamental right of human beings in society is the right to self-determination, convinced that the time had come to attain democratic self-government for Tobago, recognizing the need for the people of Tobago to speak with one voice on the issue, have submerged their individual political parties' agendas and agreed to constitute the Forum of Tobago Political Parties for the principal purpose of working together to attain democratic self-government for Tobago, the single most important goal of the Tobago people. And whereas the Forum, conscious that the populations of the islands, the communities, families, and individual citizens that constitute the Union have never previously been fully informed, consulted, or engaged on the issue over these years, and that the conversations, debates, agreements, and edits sought, reached, and proclaimed have been matter for the governments at the colonial offices in London and in Port of Spain. And whereas the process consisting of a series of consultations entitled Towards Tobago's Autonomy has engaged the population of Tobago, living in Tobago, Trinidad, the Caribbean, and the wider diaspora, has examined the proper way forward for Tobago and sought consensus on 1. Issues fundamental to Tobago's self-government. 2. Issues fundamental to Tobago in a relationship with Trinidad. 3. A set of core principles that transcend political differences. 4. A process of inter-party consultation on fundamental issues relating to Tobago. Be it resolved that this Convention of the People of Tobago, meeting here at the Signal Hill Secondary School today, September 14, 2014, A, agrees and asserts that the issues fundamental to democratic self-government for Tobago include inter alia. 1, responsibility of the Tobago administration to formulate and implement policy on all matters affecting the lives of the people resident in Tobago. 2, equality of status between the islands and a constitutional, legislative, and administrative framework reflecting such equality. 3, a federal-type system of governance. 4, delineation of the boundaries of each island. 5, jurisdiction and control over economic resources in Tobago's defined geographic space. 6, freedom for the Tobago administration to make laws to govern Tobago. 7, ability to borrow to fund Tobago's development. 8, authority and responsibility in Tobago administration to formulate and implement fiscal policy, including taxation measures. 9, removal of cabinet dominance and override of decisions made in Tobago by the Tobago administration. 10, legal framework providing for the wider participation of the Tobago society in the decision-making process of the Tobago administration. 11, management and control of the inter-island transportation systems to reside in Tobago. B, do hereby authorize, instruct, and mandate the Forum of Political Leaders to take all proper and necessary steps to achieve and secure democratic self-government for Tobago in the shortest possible time. C, requires that the Forum ensures that the self-government secured for Tobago includes the appropriate provisions to treat with issues agreed and asserted in A, 1 to 11 above. I do hereby move this resolution to the people of Tobago.
I'm sorry. I propose an amendment. I think it's about the 5th slide, Madam Chair, with due respect. Regarding the international law framework, mention was made on the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR, but the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, which is the other limb because it's a two-limbed covenant. That covenant is missing. And they are the 2 international legal covenants that break down the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. Please, I beg that it be inserted.
My name is Vanessa Boyce, and I would like to second the motion for democratic self-government for Tobago.
Pleasant evening to members of the head table. Chief Secretary, Dr. Mr. Orville London, former and future Chief Secretary, Mr. Hochai Charles, other members of the head table. My name is Yosi Dunbi, and I was here to really second that motion, but a lot of people want to rush like a kind of never see come sitting is okay. But it's all right. Now, I was made to understand that there are some questions that I would like to put forward to Mr. Charles and Mr. London. I was made to understand that you all were at Radio Tambrin on Friday.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, before we see that there's a mass movement of people, let's just have a vote before the meeting is concluded. Those who are in favor of the motion, please. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, members of the head table, ladies and gentlemen, I do not know whether it is a faux pas, but in my youth, I happened to attend several meetings, AYPA, Village Council, you name it. And I know when minutes have been read, if there are corrections, then having been corrected or amendments being made, then there is a vote. But I don't know that it went the other way around. And I'm concerned about that because I heard a Miss Melville, I think Ingrid Melville, speak to some correction or something of the sort. And that was not put to the House before we voted. And therefore, we are doing it the wrong way around. So we need to put it right. That's my concern. And I would also like to say thanks to the Honorable Mr. Neil Wilson for having the tenacity to mention Dr. Winston Murray as a member of Parliament in the 1977 House of Representatives. There is a faux pas. We could not move the motion until the corrections.
I am Dr. Guy Obiako, and together with Mrs. Vanessa Cutting-Thomas and Ms. Zelma Cowie, the young administrative team who supports us on a daily basis, I would like to thank you for your participation. I would also like to say that this Secretariat has functioned in an uncompromising representation for the people of Tobago in our documentations. And as such, all the proceedings have been recorded, and we have used the procedure as used at the United Nations that can be checked against the delivery, ensuring that all the audio and video recordings of statements that have been made at the meetings are available in our offices on the first floor. Please, the Secretariat and the leaders of the political parties have listened to your concerns regarding what you want to see in the administration of Tobago within the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago that can directly address the issues of Tobagonians in the socio-economic and political context. There have been 11 issues which have been outlined as important and have been brought to the people at this convention and will be crafted into a document that will be taken to Parliament of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago for local parliamentary debate and discussion, or if necessary, international debate on the rights of the people of Tobago. In this context, the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, as a member state of the United Nations, and the people of Tobago's right to self-determination as listed in the Charter of the United Nations in compliance with the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, will begin. The transformation of our rights as a people has begun in this resolution. You, the people of Tobago, have said that patriotism and love for Tobago must transcend political polarization. As the leader of the Secretariat for Towards Tobago's Autonomy, the charge is now for the leaders of the People's National Movement here in Tobago and the Platform of Truth and the Secretariat. Since you as leaders have put aside your political differences for the democratic progress of this island, You now have a mandate from this Convention of Tobago, Tobagonians, and our brothers and sisters in Trinidad who attended the forum at the University of the West Indies as a testament that must be translated into a document. The people of Tobago's right to self-determination and their autonomy is on the national and international agenda and will not be off the agenda until it is achieved by the people of Tobago. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your participation in this exercise on towards Tobago's autonomy.